Is this the Trade Ministry of Australia?
Oh yes, ma'am, it is right.
Yeah, I'm from the Trade Ministry of New Zealand. I want to ask you a problem. I read a report about our export to Australia, our apples export from last week, and what I read is that you refuse to accept our apples and you send it back to our country. Is that right?
Oh yeah, well that is right, but actually we are really sorry for that because we found something bad in your apple. We found three bacteria in your apple, and we think it's really dangerous for our people to eat. So we just send it back to you.
Sorry, but we cannot accept it because it's not what it should be in our SPS agreement. Because what written in there is that you should accept our apples export from our country. That's what written in our agreement, and you're not doing it as what it should be. So I think it's not acceptable for us.
Yeah, once again we are really sorry about that because we have done research to your apple, and we found three bacteria, and it is not a fit to our national standard of of Australian and New Zealand food agreement. So we just send it back to you.
Well, I think you don't have any evidence and you don't have any great reason to turn back apples to our country, and we refuse to accept your apology or anything. I think it's not acceptable to our country because your evidence is only on one side, because from our side our apples is actually a great quality apple. This is a very high quality apple, so we we don't see any problem in our apples, and absolutely there is no bacteria when we send our apples to your country.
All right, but we have done research. We have. You say it on your perspective, and we have our own perspective. So, you know what? Let's just bring this case to WTO. What do you think about it?
Well, because it's not acceptable from our country perspective, and also we cannot accept your apology, so let's see, this is in the WTO. Okay, thank you, bye.
All right. All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
The word trade organizations, or used to call by WTO, is intergovernmental organizations that is concerned with the regulation of international trade between nations. The WTO officially commenced on 1st January 1995 under the Marrakesh Agreement that signed by 124 nations on 15 April that replaces the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, or GATT, which commenced in the 1998. And also, WTO is the largest international economic organizations in the world. The WTO deals with regulations of trade in goods, services, and intellectual property between participating countries by providing a framework for negotiating trade agreement and a dispute resolutions process aimed at enforcing participant adherence to WTO agreements, which are signed by representatives of member governments and ratified by their parliaments.
This WTO multilateral trading system is regulator-driven agreement that contains the basic rule of international trade as a result of negotiations. They have been signed by member countries. The WTO is a rules-based organization that is the result of negotiations. Thus, the rules are also called agreement. The agreement must be produced from a series of negotiations carried out by all member countries. In 2007, the Australian government stopped importing the New Zealand apples because they had several dangerous bacteria thereafter the New Zealand reported to the WTO organization. Many New Zealand's proposed procedures have been issued to the WTO in the hope of allowing the New Zealand apples to return to Australia. The settlement lasts approximately 4 years under the supervision of the Dispute Resolution Agency or DSP. The appeal examination found no fire blight, European cancer, and multicultural mite in New Zealand apples. This New Zealand won over the problem and Australia was ready to give the entrance to the New Zealand apple after the 8-month break.
This dispute was successfully resolved and took approximately 4 years. The dispute was completed starting with the WTO statement on the victory of New Zealand. On 9 August 2010, the WTO panel released its final report to the parties and the wider WTO membership. The panel found that all of Australia's applied measures for New Zealand were challenged by New Zealand, as well as Australia's final import risk analysis report for apples from New Zealand, or final IRA, are inconsistent with Australia's legal obligation as WTO member under the WTO Agreement on the Application of Sanitary and Phytosanitary Measures, or SPS Agreement. After this dispute is over, Australia has given permission to import and retrade New Zealand apples as of August 2011, with a policy that applies the condition of New Zealand apple imports by the Quarantine Director. Australia also accepted an apple export agreement from China and exports of Fuji apples from Japan after the completion of New Zealand's apple exports at the WTO.
WTO, as an international institution that handles and focuses on international trade issues, plays an important role in the analysis and resolution of this dispute. The WTO, as a system, has the right to provide a formal forum for resolving problems. In these problems, the WTO has an official mechanism and body to help resolve existing problems, namely the panel, dispute settlement body, and the Appellate Body. In the January 2008, WTO established a body consisting of 6 members, which is Chile, European Communities, Japan, China Taipei, the United States, the Pakistan, and after that, in the March 2008, the WTO Director General complete the panel. The problem resolution at the WTO has several stages that are long enough for the settlement, from the stage of consultation, panel formation, review, implementation, and resolve the problem. In this panel, settlement takes a lot of time because it uses expert consultation process and identifies and also select expert in reviewing the problems in New Zealand and Australian apple import.
This case began when Australia stopped importing apples from New Zealand, arguing that the apples contain dangerous ingredients, namely bacterial fire blight, European cankers, and apple leveling midge or ALCM. The termination of apple import has been carried out since the 1920 and repeated again in the 2007. Australia's action on the phytosanitary process of importing apples is considered not in accordance of the appropriate level of protection. Why? Because the risk assessment of New Zealand apples can be accounted due to lack of scientific evidence. New Zealand has submitted a request for a dispute settlement to the World Trade Organization because New Zealand thinks that Australia has discriminated New Zealand apples, and New Zealand also consider that Australia's action is not in accordance with fair free trade agreement. Therefore, New Zealand filed a lawsuit against Australia to the World Trading Organization on the grounds that Australia wasn't consequent in implementing the SPS agreement.
So the apple import case between Australia and New Zealand occurred in 2007 and also had happened in 1920. At first, New Zealand felt Australia had discriminated their apples because Australia sent back those apples, and Australia claimed that those apples contained 3 bacteria. But on the other hand, New Zealand couldn't accept that situation and finally filed a lawsuit against Australia and sent it to the World Trade Organization. At the end, World Trade Organization formed a panel consisting the member itself to an intermediary council to solve the problem. This case was completed in 4 years, and the result was New Zealand won. And in 2011, Australia did re-export apples to New Zealand that were not contain any bacteria for New Zealand.